You're listening to Real Investor Radio with Craig Fuhr and Jack Bevere, where we cover advanced real estate investing topics to help you stay ahead of the curve in your real estate investing business. Well, hey, welcome to Real Investor Radio. I'm Craig Fuhr with Jack Bevere. Jack, how are you today?
Doing great, man. Good to see you this morning.
Merry Christmas, my friend.
Likewise.
You were struggling with the creeping crud over the holidays. You're feeling better now?
I am. I feel like half the office caught it last week and was limping into the holiday weekend, but coming out of it much better.
Well, if your Christmas was anything like mine, Jack, I have a very loud Italian family, so it was actually just good to get back to work, just to get some relaxation, frankly. I don't want you to hear that, but man, it is like a chore when you get 25 Italians in a room who all want to talk over each other. So that was my Christmas, and I'm sure yours was not like that.
It was good. We had lots of good family time, made the rounds, did like 3 straight days, morning, afternoon, morning, night at different places. So we were touring around, ate very well. Need to hit the gym a little bit after that in the wake of it, but
what was the big Christmas gift, Jack? What did Santa bring you that you were excited about this year? Anything?
You know what? My wife and I stopped doing gifts a year or two ago. We just, decided to travel a little bit more and kind of de-emphasized the stuff. We have actually done a bunch of like purging of like our things just to like really try to get as minimalist as possible on stuff. So we're taking a trip to St. Thomas next week. I'm looking forward to that. I guess you could call that our impromptu kind of Christmas trip to our Christmas gift to each other.
That's awesome. Experience over the material, Jack. You try to tell that to a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they look at you like you're 3. You don't need another sweatshirt, but we would love to have some experiences with our children these days. So yeah, well, that's the struggle. But dude, we're coming into the sort of last episode of the podcast for the year here, the last couple. And folks, we've been talking to a lot of investors over the last few weeks about their plans for 24. Sort of goal planning, and your idea for the episode today, I loved. It was sort of let's take a look at 24, how we're going to be better, some of the tools that we use, goal setting. So yeah, man, why don't you kick us off with that and sort of tell me what you're thinking in terms of 24 planning and some of the tools that you guys use, some of the vendors that you all use, just to be better in the business.
Yeah, sure. So we, as we've grown Dominion, I've noticed a shift in the way that we do goal setting and year-end planning that I think has been really positive that I wanted to kind of accentuate. I think that there's if you're not setting goals, hey, like you should be, right? Everyone, but I feel like everyone knows that, or that's not high value add. I would say for the first 5, maybe even 10 years of our company, we would do goal planning, year-end planning and goal setting rather for the next year, and they were largely quantitative in nature. Mm-hmm. It was how many houses are we going to buy next year? How many loans are we going to make? How much do we want to grow the team? Very, whether it was top line or bottom line. It was very quantitative. And then we as we got better at it, we would break that down to like, hey, what are the operational things necessary to actually achieving those quantitative goals? But at the, kind of in retrospect, after, maybe 5-10 years of that, we looked back and realized that we were just talking ourselves into working harder each year, right? Mm-hmm. Because we are ambitious people and we wanted to do more. It was fun to hit our goals and then to see what we could do next year. And we got better at it each year. So it was feasible for us to increase our goals, but it wasn't building the company. Like that goal setting was not growing the enterprise value was the word that we started to use for it of the business. Because it ended up just being, hey, how good are we at doing the particular revenue or top line producing things, business development things that in this case, Fred and I were responsible for respectively.
And sort of how much incrementally better can we get to reach those quantitative goals, right?
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, it ended up being like personal goals.
Mm-hmm.
And when our personal goals are how many houses we're going to buy, how many loans we're going to do, almost definitionally, right? What that infers without being said is that I'm the acquisitions guy, I'm the loan originator, and that we are the revenue producing employees, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're the people who have to do that. And I feel like that is a place where a lot of real estate investors are. And frankly, it's where you have to start. I also
Yep.
think it's like, this isn't a criticism. Like that's where that is what you need to do at the beginning. Those are the most crucial things. And frankly, you can't afford
Yeah.
to hire that.
I love the gurus that stand on stage full well knowing that they're talking to 90% of people who are solopreneurs, and they're just preaching this, got to take off all the hats, you got to just do your highest and best, which is great. But when you're just starting out and you don't have the capital to go out and hire the best personnel, yeah, you're going to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You're gonna wear a lot of hats, and while it's true, like something that a couple of tools that I wanted to like emphasize today or talk about today are tools that we started to use that actually enabled us to start making that shift. And by the way, it was never a 1 year shift. It was like a multi-year. It took many years to make that transition. Because you have to afford it, right? You have to afford all that backfilling that the gurus are telling you to do, so that you can actually start to have a company and not just a cult of personality.
sure. Can you before we jump into the tools,
Mhm.
can you talk about some of those qualitative um, assessments that what specifically are you speaking of when you talk about the sort of qualitative versus quantitative?
Yeah, sure. So I think that I think a first order one is documentation of systems and processes, but I think that thing is that idea has been beat to a that horse has been beaten badly over the years. Everyone knows that. Yes, you have to have systems and processes. Yes, you have to document your system and processes so that you can hire and train people on those. Yes, we know. Everyone knows. So like that's and I believe that to be true, and it's incredibly important. It's a gating issue to
Mhm.
growing your company. So, but I don't want to belabor that because I think everyone already knows about it. Um, Something that and that's where we originally emphasized, and then we did it, and then we were like, okay, cool. Like now I got a handbook, but
Who's following it?
I didn't like nothing happened, right? Like I just had a handbook that I would have to then, I just added more work to somebody, right? That I had to like pay someone to then document their systems and processes. And now they were documented, and maybe onboarding was a little bit easier, but it was certainly no springboard for growth. It was a necessary part of the foundation for growth, but it was not a springboard for growth.
Sure.
So a couple of the things that we've that really helped us to actually move forward. We started, and this is just an example. There's many examples, right? So I'm not suggesting that this is like a catch-all or like
It's not a playbook.
yeah. But it's so we started. There's the book called Traction. I think a lot of investors know about Traction. If you don't, I'd highly recommend that you read it. Traction is a book that outlines a model for operating small business in any realm. It's very applicable to small real estate businesses, but frankly, you could use it for just about any business. And that's this EOS model, Entrepreneurial Operating System model, and that and the business model. By the way, there was always a business model behind this stuff, right? The business model behind selling you this model is that there are integrators that act as consultants who come in and help you take your solopreneur business and uh, and walk you through the EOS model to do it, to show you how to do it. We never did that. Maybe we should have. I don't know. I read the book, right? I read the book. I read the book again. And then I just acted as our integrator. And we took from it what we wanted to. We didn't take everything. But we took the things that we thought would make the biggest impact. I'm sure that the traction evangelists will tell me that I'm leaving good stuff behind, and I should really take a second look at incorporating everything. But hey, what we did was just I took a number of the concepts from that and made that the way that we operated the business. The
We
biggest
were
things were
well. I just
shorter.
want to,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
if I may, that was a while ago, Jack. That was like
Yeah,
2016 for you, 2015, 16, and you've still been implementing the EOS strategies that you read back in 2015. Is that correct?
yeah. We implemented it. It made such a big difference, frankly, to my daily life, just like keeping things organized,
Yeah.
getting rid of the surprises. Man, the surprises are what, like, personally for me, like, just kill me. Like when I find out as a surprise that that something isn't going well, or that something wasn't being done, that just like destroys my morale as like an owner of the company, right? Because then I can't sleep because I don't know because all of a sudden the fear and doubt of I don't know what I don't know, that's crippling, right? Like, I can handle all kinds of bad news. Like, you wake up and I get an email and there's bad news, whatever. But it's the surprise internally that it like just destroys me. And so this, I think incorporating a lot of the process, or a lot of the tools and techniques, which is really just like it's about meetings. It's about setting goals of varying time frames, really walking back those goals and breaking them down into their component parts, so you really create a roadmap from them, and then producing, measuring everything that your company does, and putting a number to pretty much everything that your people do for you, yourself included, and then watching those numbers over time. It took a couple years,
I
actually.
wouldn't
Like,
that's what I wanted to ask you. So you and I don't know many people in the business, Jack, who haven't read the book Traction. There's that book has been widely adopted, at
yeah,
least picked up and read. And so the question I have, that I know that folks who have read it who have not yet adopted uh, must be asking is, there's some serious growing pains in adopting sort of the EOS regimen, right? And for those who are just taking a small piece like you did it here at Dominion, versus those who go out and hire an integrator, there's still going to be a significant amount of growing pains in adopting these meetings. Yes.
it's funny you say that. I think that there are growing pains for certain personality types, and it's welcome religion for others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of visionary personality profiles that would call this painful, and that'll get me to. I don't want to jump ahead to the other tool that I really want to talk about today, but it has to do with recognition and a vocabulary to talk about different personality types.
Sure.
That is actually actionable. But I feel like I think that what's the book that talks about the classic visionary integrator combo? I don't know. The listeners will know. So there's this classic combo that in many entrepreneurial organizations, when you look back, that are high performing, where there is a visionary and there's an integrator, and they work very well together. They tend to be at the top of the organization. But if you just have a visionary and you have no integrator, then you create a hot mess. And if you have just an integrator and no visionary, well, you have a lifestyle business that doesn't grow, right? Like, it runs tight, but it's small. And so to have both, right, to have a growth company that also runs well, you really have to have two different kinds of people, right? You definitionally need multiple people in leadership to have a company that both grows and still runs well.
And operates,
And
right?
the relationship between those two people ends up being like the magic, the secret sauce, right? That allows organizations to really take off. In our capacity, we're not the highest growing company by any stretch of the imagination, but we just so happen to have my partner Fred as the visionary, and I happen to be more of an integrator personality profile. And so that was a complete accident. We had no idea when we started working together. We just thought, like, oh, I'm different than this guy, but he's smart, and but like vice versa. and we just started working together, and it just turns out that we happened to like put that accidental formula in place that has been well documented as like something that we should have known was happening, but we didn't.
The book, by the way, Jack, is Rocket Fuel. I think is the
Yes,
one you're looking at.
thank you. Rocket
Also
Fuel.
by Gino Wickman, the guy who wrote Traction.
Yeah. So anyway, I digress. But I think that my point being that if you're a visionary who is running a hot mess, I'm being very crass, right? But like who's running a hot mess and you know it, you need to get yourself an integrator. Like that's what you need. And because you read Traction and you like the ideas on it, and then nothing ever happened because you went back in, and that's your personality. Your personality is not to dig back in there. And so I think that the business model around Traction, to have these third party consultants come in as integrators and roll out Traction in your organization, you'll see a shot out of the gun, out of the cannon of improvement, because you've outsourced your integrator. But then as soon as that guy's contract is up, that girl's contract's up, and they're not part of your organization on a regular basis, you'll start sliding back. Like you 100% will start sliding back. You need to hire someone who's going to be that integrator within the organization on a consistent basis to keep it up. And to them, it's not a growing pain. To them, it's just, okay, cool. These are the rules.
It's liberating for people like that.
Yeah, there's some religion to stick to. Like, it's not just we're going to run everything off of feel and emotion. So anyway, that's a long digression to your comment, but I couldn't help myself.
Can I ask you this? So I've met some great visionaries in the business who did not have integrators. I've also met visionaries in the business, very successful investors, who hired an integrator, Jack, but they didn't empower the integrator.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's always been a relationship between you and Fred where you felt very empowered to, as a partner and sort of run the business with a common vision. But as your role at Dominion has evolved and you become busier and busier, Jack, there had to come a time where even you had to have integrators below you, folks who you had to not only hire, but empower to, to carry out the vision that I think you have in your role as well. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what does that feel like for a guy who has been so in control of almost, every aspect of the business, to have to let that go and really give that person who you feel is a proper fit for the role, that power to sort of carry out the mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think that that's what's necessary there is building up of trust, right?
Yeah.
The reason that Fred didn't let me start running stuff right away. We worked together for several years. We worked together for a year on acquisitions before I was making offers by myself, and I was a kid at the time. Like even that was early.
Sure.
And so I feel like that trust is built over some period of time, and so like the earlier that you can bring that integrator in and try them out and start to build that trust and just put them next to you. What Fred did with me was he just put me in the car. I drove while he was sitting in the passenger seat talking on the phone, and I just watched him conduct business for a year. And I just, as soon as he got off I'd be listening. He'd put the phone on speaker and I'd hear the whole conversation. And then we would be driving to wherever we're driving to. And I'm just asking questions like constantly, right? Just learning and soaking up as much as I possibly can. And then, and giving feedback, giving comments, mostly asking questions though, just to get, to get his take on things. And I think that, so he was really my mentor in that respect, and taught me absolutely everything that I know about the business. And through that process, he began to trust my judgment, because he understood that I was like thinking intently, thinking as deeply as I could about all of the issues, and was going to then go act based off of everything, all the training that he had given me. And I think that that's a great way to do it. to just put the integrator in the car with you and have them just shadow you for a long period of time. Now, that's a difficult thing when your integrator wants to get paid $150,000, right? Like,
Sure.
and you're running a 3-person organization, 5-person organization, and you got somebody who comes in and they want to be, you think they're the right fit, but they're also expensive. Like, that's a problem, right? You can't have them down like that for a long period of time. So I also think that, like, from a practical point of view, we also got lucky because I was 23 at the time. And so I was cheap. And that was fine, right? Like, I
And
needed beer
very
money and
hungry.
rent. What's that?
Cheap and very hungry. So like it was a
Yeah.
perfect combination.
Yeah. But anyway, so my point being that it's a trust building exercise. And I have endeavored to bring in, we have, as a company, not just me, all of the managers, we've endeavored to bring in other integrators into positions of authority. And then as they've gained our trust, we let the leash out, right? Like, need to be involved in fewer decisions, don't need to run it by me as much. Like, now there's a process there, though. It's never day one. They never
Sure.
hit the ground. In my experience, they never hit the ground running. There's always at least 6-month process, more like a year and a half, before where they're just asking you questions about the business until they understand the perspective, and then they have to trust you, right? That you actually know what the hell you're talking about, right? There's a two-way street here. If you want a good integrator, they're smart. And so, like, you have to earn their trust that they actually think that your vision is a valid one and that you're not just leading us down the wrong path, because they have no interest in wasting their time with that, right?
Yeah.
So that takes a while to build that trust.
I don't want to mention the folks by name who are one of the best integrator / visionary combos that I've seen in the business, but I'm sure you probably have heard of both. But the point here is that I think that oftentimes the visionary can be very the kite flying in the wind, right, Jack? They've got a mission, they're running a company, they're being pulled in a million different directions, and they have a lot of really great ideas at the same time. And so great integrators, I think, often when they're empowered to be their best selves, often sort of act as that, hand on the kite, right? They're holding the kite down. They're pushing back on business ideas that, maybe tangential to sort of what the business really is, or maybe even a lark. A lot of visionaries, a lot of great entrepreneurs, Jack, wake up with great ideas that they want to implement immediately. And sometimes it's not the right time and it's not the right idea for the business. And I think great integrators, when they're empowered, have the ability to push back. They're not just the best integrator for me is not a yes person. Right?
Yeah, definitely the case. Completely agree with that. They have to be able to go to share the vision, but go toe to toe in terms of saying, like, yes, but that's not what we should. But tomorrow, but to achieve yes, we need to do this and this and this. Not no. It's never no, right? Like, if you get a no integrator, though, and that's I think an important balance is like, yes, if it's a good idea, right? If it's a crappy idea, hey, you beat the crappy idea up and it dies. But the visionary understands that it's a crappy idea if you just prove to them that it's unexecutable, right? Because they want to do is win, So, like, if you explain to them how this is not a winning path, they're off of it, right? But just because it's a difficult path or it's not a direct straight line, you don't approach that visionary with no. You approach that visionary with yes. And to do that, we're going to need to do this and this and this and this and this in this order.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's get started, right? If you
maybe wrap up some of these other things that were priorities on the plate, and then we'll get to that great idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yes, and we have these other things that are equally important. How do we want to rank these things? Like, how do we want to let's break this down and set priorities. We have a particular amount of bandwidth, and you have a particular amount of things that we want to get done. Let's rank them, and then if there's something that's on there on the list that's just not going to get done yet, but it's worth getting done, all right, let's talk about allocating resources to it. Like, and where are we going to get these resources, both human and capital, to go accomplish this goal? So like the yes and conversation, I think goes, much better. I'll also put fault, like visionaries always get the bad rap, right? They always get, labeled as the flighty one. The integrators, though, if you're a no integrator, well, then you're not going to get, they're not going to, they're not going to hand you the keys. The visionary is not going to trust you with the keys because they know what they're going to get out of you. A no, they're not going to want to share their ideas with you because you're a buzzkill, right? Like they come to you with a great idea they get really excited about, and you just tell them no. That's a buzzkill, dude. Like no one wants to work with that person. So like I think integrators sometimes, or the wrong integrators, right? The ones who shouldn't be in the C-suite, so to speak, are the ones that, or at least an example of them, are the ones that that can't. That just dig their heels in and can't figure out a way to yes and. They just want to know, or they just want to quote unquote know. And that's unproductive. It's unhealthy. And then the visionary ends up getting frustrated and fires this person because they start battling with each other because you just say no to everything they want to do, and they're like, "Screw this! This isn't even fun anymore." Right? Like I don't. The visionary doesn't want to do it if it's not fun. They like to go do stuff.
Have you run into that, Jack, over the past several years?
Yeah, I've witnessed it at other companies a fair amount. I've hired the wrong integrators a couple times, where I was trying to backfill myself out, and I got too much no, and I just I ended up getting frustrated myself, right? Like I'm kind of an integrator, and if I just couldn't get this person on board, or it's either like no, it can't be done, or it's all fucked up, right? Like or you get this feedback that like it's too much of a mess. We can't move forward at all. And when I just don't believe that that's true, right? Like you have to be able to live with some imperfection in growth. You cannot grow at 99% efficiency. If you wait until 99% efficiency to grow, you'll never grow, right? Like 85 is frankly good enough to grow. Like we need people backfilling and making it better and getting it from 85 to 96. But at 96, who cares, right? Like if you can't make money at 96, it was a crappy idea. That like it's not about execution. If you've gotten it to 96% good, the idea wasn't good enough. Work on something else,
right?
So like I feel like got enough high A in me to try to draw those distinctions.
So we'll get into sort of how you find the right person for the seat in a bit, but tying up traction with a Bojack. As I look at the growth of Dominion over the last several years, I would love to know where you rank implementing traction and the EOS in terms of importance in the growth that you've experienced.
I would put it in top 3. I would say documenting our systems and processes, traction, or the EOS model rather itself, what we took from the EOS model. And I would say one of the most important things from that EOS model was the putting a number to every activity in the company, like figuring out a way to measure every activity, put a number to it so that we could see it over time. And man, 3 years after we implemented it, I realized that I was still, that I'd missed some stuff, right? Like whenever I got surprised by something that wasn't going well, it was the thing that I wasn't measuring, right? Like if you're measuring it, you never get surprised. But the thing that's going, but it took several years for me to uncover all the things that we should be measuring. And I used the bar being that if I found out, if I was surprised with bad news, I should have been measuring it. And if I had been measuring it, I wouldn't have been surprised with bad news. So whenever my blood pressure went up through the roof, the problem was not what happened. The problem was that I wasn't measuring that thing for the past 3 years. And if I had been, then my blood pressure would never be where it is right now.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about the traction model is that if you're doing it correctly, it forces you to have the difficult conversations, which is another great book, Difficult Discussions, I think it's called. And you can only look, if you want to get better and you don't want to be surprised and you don't want to have your blood pressure go up, you have to address the big rocks, all of the big problems in a company and all of the big opportunities and all those things. You have to put a quantitative number on each of those, and then you have to address them routinely. And I think that's one of the things that Traction does with the meetings that you have. They don't allow you to sort of keep sweeping all of the problems under the rug if you're doing it correctly.
100%,
right?
100% agree to that.
Yeah. And then and then in addition to that, as you start to grow the company, you start to have people in place that are empowered to bring those issues up, rather than, oh, I'm sitting at the table in the C-suite and I don't want to bring up the big issues because the spotlight will be on me. No, the Traction is sort of an open forum for bringing up those things, which I really love. And I think you guys have really adopted.
Yeah.
So we got about 15 minutes left in this episode. One of the other things that we've touched on here, but not really directly, is putting the right person in the seat. You said that when you and Fred got together, it was just kismet that he happened to be a great visionary and you were, a really smart integrator. I think
accidental integrator. Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's a part of you that's quite the visionary as well, Jack. But talk about how you all have adopted the cultural index as a sort of a behavioral assessment model for the folks who you've been hiring over the last several years. Because one of the things that I find fascinating about the growth of the company is that there's a lot of people who were here in 2015 and 16 who are still here. And they've grown with the growth of the company. They were integral to the growth of the company. And so when you look back at an HR manager or, a guy who's been sitting in the loan department for a long time at DFS, when you're looking at those people, was it accidental that you hired just the right people for the right spot? Or did you think you were that good at assessing talent when you brought them in?
Yeah. So when we got the right person in the right chair prior to implementing this personality survey system, which I'll talk about, there was a complete accident. And then when we used the personality assessment, it was confirmatory that, oh, we got that one right, and we got that one right, and we got that one right, but we got a bunch of the other ones wrong. And they all just organically didn't work out.
Just fizzled out.
They just, it all just, those seats turned over.
Right.
And so I would say, I always had a difficulty in, a struggle with hiring, a struggle with talking about people, in that I'm a big fan of, I was raised knowing my dad used to talk about Myers-Briggs when I was like 11 years old in the car on the way to school and on the way to go get Chinese food. Like my dad loved personality tests. He thought it was the coolest thing. So he taught me about Myers-Briggs. He taught me about DISC when I was a kid, like a little kid. And I was raised, knowing my personality profile and talking about those differences. But as I went through school and went through business school and got into the workforce, I just they didn't seem specific enough to me to be actionable. Yeah. And they seemed like an academic indulgence as opposed to something that I could actually deploy as a decision-making tool.
Exactly.
And
yes, absolutely.
And so, I never found a whole lot of use for them. And as a result, when we would hire, we would, try to use what we found to be best practices in terms of, cover letter or no cover letter. And do you hire based off of experience? Let's define culture, alignment with the company's core values and, having multiple people do the part of the hiring process. And we tried to align, based off of all of these, quote unquote, best practices. And yet we would still have, and yet, 6 months in, we would be like, this guy's just not working out. This woman's just not working out. What did we get wrong? And how do we put or a situation would get put in front of them and they would react to it. They were very trained. They knew exactly. They were very trained. They were very experienced. They were very smart people. We were appropriately paying for the position, and yet they handled it in a way that I would never have handled it that way. And that would just, and my head would explode, and I would have this awful thought, which was, what is this person's malfunction? Like, what is wrong with this person? And then they would end up not working out, right? And we were like, you chalk it up to like, we had the right person in the wrong chair, or the right chair in the wrong person, whatever. Like, and we'd say some word and then try again. And so I got introduced to this personality survey called Culture Index, and there is a very similar one called Predictive Index. They're two different companies using very similar math behind this personality survey, and they have different business models. Culture Index uses more of a consultant basis. They charge consulting fees to help you implement the model, and we've gone that direction. That was very helpful for us. Predictive Index is a little bit more, a little lower price point. The math is just as good. You get a little bit less help implementing it though, so you really have to have that person who's really into it to like dig in and understand and then train everybody else.
Yeah. So,
and that's a heavy lift for certain, that's a heavy lift sometimes.
Yeah. So let me just explain quickly, Jax, for those of who have heard of these two assessment tools, but haven't necessarily used them. It's really uncanny when you sit down to take the predictive index or the cultural index. You're just looking at words and you're picking out words that resonate with who you are, essentially. And it takes about 6 or 7 minutes. And the predictive index has been shown to be like 98% accurate historically over the entire time that it's been around. In fact, it's one of the only tools that can be used in hiring and firing for EEOC purposes. I've read. That said, what you get with each one of these assessments is a pretty big printout of the person. And what you're speaking to is, hiring a consultant to come in and basically help you interpret that assessment and sort of finding the right fit for the person and the seat, correct?
Yeah. So they have you take the survey. Well, sorry. So you start as an employer, right? If you're going to use it in an HR context, a hiring context for HR, you start with the job description, and the hiring manager, or the owner of the company, hiring manager, fills out a survey, and then based off of like, hey, the ideal person you're looking for this position, and so they call it a C job. The words don't matter, but you basically create a typified profile from the job. So you say like, hey, for this position, after you take the survey, they say, all right, you're looking for one of these 3 personalities,
traits.
Yeah. Types. Yeah. And then you say, all right, I'm looking for, they have different, terms for it. I'm looking for a technical expert for that position. And then resumes start coming in. And as part of the resume process, you take this survey when you apply. So you have to submit your resume and take this survey, which I've actually, by the way, found to be a great screener, because if you're not willing to spend 7 minutes and take my personality survey, like you just want to blast resumes everywhere, I'm not that into, you're not that into me, as they say. And you've made it very clear you weren't willing to invest 7 minutes in my personality survey. So I can probably discard those folks anyway, or would want to discard those folks anyway. It's a small barrier to entry. But anyway, so you take this personality survey, and if you come up as a completely different personality profile than what is typified for this position, don't look at the resume, because the problem is that you will fall in love with the resume. They worked for a competitor was the biggest thing that always got me. I would see somebody who was working for a big property management company, not a direct competitor, but in a related field. And I would be like, this person's got very relevant experience. And then I'd get on an interview with them. And the whole time, subconsciously, I'm just talking myself into this person, right? Because I want that Morgan Properties experience, or Morgan Property Management experience on my staff, right? Like, and so we end up just talking ourselves into
The wrong
flawed as
person.
humans as we are, we end up talking ourselves into the person, and they're giving us a biased view of themselves. We've got a biased view when we go into it because we looked at their resume and what I'm supposed to spend, like, whether it's 30 minutes or multiple interviews, or you do a bunch of rounds, or have them come in for a shadow day, whatever. Like, it's all an audition, right? And one of the things that that these personality surveys will espouse is that people can behavior modify a lot. They can modify their behavior to fit a situation. Everyone can be very talented in that regard, and put on a completely different outward, persona in a given situation. But you are yourself when you are alone and when you are stressed. Then in those two situations, you are yourself. And if you're looking to hire an employee that you're not going to be, it's very tiring to behavior modify. I can do it, right? But
Yes.
I can't do it all the time. It eventually drains my battery to behavior modify. And so you want to hire the personality that fits the chair, the right personality for that chair, because you want their default to be designed that what is, the person for the chair.
Right.
So you need a way to measure that. And I was the biggest hater on this, right? Like, I'm very quantitative. I hate, and given, and I thought, I'm like, shit, dad taught me,
Yeah.
dad taught me Myers-Briggs when I was like 9 years old. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm quite familiar with personality surveys. And if there was a good one, like, I'd have heard about it, but I hadn't. And I ended up and I resisted for almost a year. I was being told by some peers in our mastermind in Real Investor Roundtable about this tool. And I was the guy just digging my heels in, being like, this is fluffy bullshit. I'm not going to waste my time on it. And eventually I just got told, like, hey, Jack, you're screwing up right now. You need to just go through the testing and, go through the training. And I go through these 3 days or 2 days of training, and I come out the other side an absolute evangelist. Like, I shifted gears like you've never seen. I'm a born again, personality survey.
What was it? What was it? What was that defining thing over that 2 days that you were like, oh wow, this stuff is the real deal? Because
Because
you are a very logical, math-minded, quantitative guy. That's who
yeah. It was because the consultant had never met me before, had never met any of my people before, and he just starts. He's at the front of the room, and he starts just describing our interpersonal relationships like he's got a video camera in my office. Describes the nature of our relationships together, the specific nature of the kinds of conflicts that we have, the way that the different ways that we react to different situations, the frustration that I'm feeling about them, the frustration they're feeling about me, as if I had spent 40 hours on his couch, right? Like, talking about this situation. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, it was mind blowing. It was crazy.
I've personally seen that, Jack, where I've been at seminars, and well, shout out to Mike McCloskey at Humanlytics. I've seen him with perfect strangers talk about them after just looking at their initial results, talking about them, their interpersonal relationships, their work relationships, their fulfillment in their position, as if he's known them all their lives. And frankly, I've seen him do it, I would say, at least 5 or 6 dozen times with 5 or 6 dozen different total strangers. And not one time did I ever hear someone say, no, that's not me. He nailed it every single time. And I think that's really speaks to the validity of these assessments, and why someone who is as logical and as quantitative as you must have looked at it and said, oh yeah, this is the real deal here.
Yeah. So the biggest thing, and the biggest thing as an organization that we got out of it, was a vocabulary to talk about the differences in personality profile, or different personality type. And so that statement that I said before, that awful thing that I used to think, what's wrong with this person, was eliminated from the way that I think about people. Like, they're not There's nothing wrong with them. They're just different. And there's a specific quantitative way for me to describe how they are different from me. And so in that situation, I would have reacted differently because there was a way to finish the sentence. I had a quantitative way to finish that sentence. And so one, you can see the problem before it happens. You don't put that person in that position for them to react in a way that you don't want them to. You should have known that you will now know not to put them in that situation, because you will get that result, that other result that you don't want. So you can actually now engineer the machine that you're building. And it's a weird kind of dark way to talk about it, frankly. Like I also think there's lots of just philosophical implications to this, but you can now design the machine that you want to build. And you need a job description. You can build out the whole org chart that you want to build, and you've got the job description to take care of all the systems and processes that we've already documented, right? So you know what you need them to do. And then you envision, all right, given the nature of that job description, what's the personality profile of the person that I want in that chair? And then you go and you find that person. And it's impossible to train someone to be someone who they are not. You can teach somebody just about anything, but you cannot teach them to be a different personality. They are who they are. And so to deny that idea, or to rage against that idea, is absolute futility. But if you just embrace it and you find the right human and then teach them what they need to know to go execute that position, we've had just materially increased, percentages of right person, right chair on the first try.
Sure.
And also it helps in terms of intra personal management, right? Because that's another difficult thing. Like once you get above 5 people, culture then you need to really talk about culture, because then it really matters. It's not just the cult of personality of whoever the owner is, which it kind of can be up to that level. From that point forward, this machine's bigger than you. Sure. And you need to understand the nature of all the actors. And this gave us a way to really talk about that and try to design culture and to see conflict before it actually, before it happened, and to then, try to tweak things in a much more intentional way, because we had a way to talk about it. So anyway.
For those who are listening, I want to dive further into just maybe a couple of the personality types. I don't even know if that's the right term, but just dive into a couple of those specifically, Jack, in certain roles within the company that you've thought, wow, that personality type really fits this role. We're up against the clock on this episode, so we can continue on the next episode, Jack, where have the listeners tune in. So we're going to finish up this episode right now, take a break, and then we'd invite you to come back for episode 28, which we're going to start in just a second. Just click on that next link for episode 28 to continue the conversation on how we're planning to be better in 2024, some of the tools and vendors that are used here at Dominion to help grow the business. So we'll take a break on this episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.